Paris to Brussels, 186 miles. By plane, 1 hour in the air. By train, 1 hour and 22 minutes. But here's the thing, almost nobody flies this route anymore. The train carries 90% of the passengers. Paris to London, the train has 80% market share. Amsterdam to Paris, the train dominates. Across Europe, on routes under 500 miles, trains are crushing airlines, not competing with them, crushing them. And it's not because Europeans are nostalgic about trains, it's because trains are actually better, faster when you factor in the full journey, more convenient, more reliable, and increasingly the only option that makes economic and environmental sense. This is the story of why Europe still chooses trains over planes, and why that choice is only getting stronger. Before we dive into the reasons, let me set the stage with some numbers that will shock you if you're American. In 2023, European railways carried over 8 billion passengers. That's billion with a B. High-speed rail alone carried over 500 million passengers. And on routes where high-speed rail competes directly with airlines, trains have captured between 50% and 90% of the market, depending on the route. These aren't niche services. These aren't tourist attractions. These are the primary way millions of Europeans travel between cities every single day. Compare that to the United States, where Amtrak carries about 32 million passengers a year. Total, for the entire country, Europe, with a similar population, carries 250 times more passengers by rail. That's not a typo, 250 times more. The difference is so stark that it raises an obvious question. Why? What does Europe know that America doesn't? Or more accurately, what did Europe do right that America got wrong? The answer isn't simple. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of geography, infrastructure investment, political will, and a fundamental understanding of what makes transportation actually work for people. But once you understand these factors, you'll see why trains aren't just surviving in Europe. They're thriving, and why that's not going to change anytime soon. But here's the twist. This isn't a story about the past. This is about the future. Because while America debates whether to build high-speed rail, Europe is expanding its networks. While American airlines consolidate routes and raise prices, European trains are adding services and lowering fares. The gap isn't closing, it's widening, and understanding why tells you everything about the future of transportation. Let's start with the most obvious reason: speed, but not the speed you think. When airlines talk about speed, they talk about how fast the plane flies. London to Paris, 1 hour and 15 minutes in the air. Sounds fast, but that's not the real journey time. The real journey starts when you leave your hotel and ends when you arrive at your destination. And that's where trains win. Let's break down a real journey. London to Paris by plane. You need to arrive at the airport 2 hours before departure for international flights. That's 2 hours. The flight is 1 hour and 15 minutes. Then you land, taxi to the gate, wait for your luggage, go through customs and take a train or taxi from Charles de Gaulle Airport to central Paris. That's another hour minimum. Total journey time, 4.5 to 5 hours. And that's if everything goes perfectly. No delays, no security lines, no lost luggage. Now let's look at the train. London St. Pancras to Paris Gare du Nord. The Eurostar recommends arriving 30 minutes before departure. The journey is 2 hours and 15 minutes. You arrive in central Paris. Total journey time, 2 hours and 45 minutes. The train is nearly twice as fast as flying when you measure the actual door-to-door journey time. This pattern repeats across Europe. Paris to Brussels, flying takes 4 to 5 hours total. The train takes 1 hour and 22 minutes. Madrid to Barcelona, flying takes 4 to 5 hours. The train takes 2.5 hours. On routes under 500 miles, trains are consistently faster than planes when you measure the full journey. But speed is only part of the story. Convenience matters just as much. Train stations are in city centers. Airports are on the outskirts. This isn't a small detail. This is fundamental. When you arrive at Paris Gare du Nord, you're in the heart of Paris. You can walk to your hotel. You can catch the metro. You're where you want to be. When you arrive at Charles de Gaulle Airport, you're 16 miles from central Paris. You need another 45 minutes to an hour to actually reach the city. This city center advantage compounds with frequency. Trains between major European cities run every hour or more frequently. Paris to Brussels? Trains every 30 minutes during peak times. You don't need to book weeks in advance. You can often just show up and buy a ticket for the next departure. Airlines can't match this. Flights between major European cities might run a few times a day. Miss your flight, and you're waiting hours for the next one. Then there's the experience on board. On a train, you can work. You can use your laptop the entire journey. You have power outlets. You have Wi-Fi. You have space to spread out. You can walk around. You can go to the dining car. On a plane, you're crammed into a seat for an hour, unable to use electronics during takeoff and landing, with no room to work effectively. For business travelers, this matters enormously. A 2-hour train journey is productive time. A 1-hour flight is wasted time. But the real reason Europe chooses trains over planes goes deeper than convenience. It's about infrastructure, about decisions made decades ago that are paying dividends today. Europe invested in railways heavily, consistently, for decades. France built over 1,700 miles of high-speed track. Spain built over 2,400 miles. Germany, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, all of them invested billions in upgrading and expanding their rail networks. This wasn't just about building new lines. It was about creating an integrated network where trains from different countries could operate seamlessly. This investment created a virtuous cycle. Better trains attracted more passengers. More passengers justified more investment. More investment led to better service. Better service attracted even more passengers. Today, European high-speed rail is profitable, not subsidized. Profitable. The trains make money. They pay for themselves and generate revenue for further expansion. Compare this to airlines, which face increasing challenges. Airports are expensive to build and expand. They require enormous amounts of land. They create noise and pollution that makes them unpopular with nearby residents, and they're reaching capacity. Major European airports like Heathrow, Charles de Gaulle, and Schiphol are operating at or near their maximum capacity. There's no room to add more flights without building new runways, which is politically and financially difficult. Trains, meanwhile, can increase capacity by running more trains on existing tracks or adding new tracks to existing corridors. It's easier, it's cheaper, and it's more politically acceptable. The result is that train capacity is expanding while airline capacity is constrained. Then there's the environmental factor. And this isn't just about feeling good, this is about policy and economics. Flying produces significantly more carbon emissions per passenger than trains, especially electric trains. A flight from Paris to Brussels produces about 10 times more CO2 per passenger than the train. As Europe pushes toward carbon neutrality, this matters. Several European countries have banned or are considering banning short-haul flights on routes where train alternatives exist. France banned domestic flights on routes where trains take less than 2.5 hours. Austria banned flights to destinations reachable by train in under 3 hours. These aren't symbolic gestures. These are real policies that are reshaping European transportation, and they're driven by both environmental concerns and economic logic. Trains are simply more efficient for short and medium distance travel. They use less energy. They produce less pollution. And as electricity grids become greener, trains become even cleaner. Airlines are trying to respond. They're investing in more efficient aircraft. They're exploring sustainable aviation fuels, but the physics are against them. Flying will always be more energy intensive than ground transportation. And as carbon pricing becomes more common in Europe, flying will become more expensive relative to trains. If you're finding this explanation of why Europe chooses trains as compelling as I am, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. And subscribe, because we've got more deep dives into transportation and infrastructure coming your way. Trust me, understanding why trains work in Europe might just change how you think about transportation everywhere. But there's another factor that's often overlooked: culture and expectations. Europeans expect trains to work. They expect them to be fast, reliable, and convenient. And because they expect it, they demand it. And because they demand it, governments and railway companies deliver it. This creates a positive feedback loop. Good train service creates demand for more train service. More demand justifies more investment. More investment leads to better service. Better service creates more demand. It's a cycle that's been running for decades in Europe, and it's only getting stronger. Compare this to the United States, where trains are seen as a novelty or a last resort, where the expectation is that you'll drive or fly, where railway investment has been minimal for decades. The result is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Poor train service leads to low demand. Low demand discourages investment. Lack of investment leads to poor service. It's the opposite cycle, and it's why American passenger rail has struggled for so long. But Europe's success with trains isn't just about passenger preference, it's about network effects. The more comprehensive the rail network, the more useful it becomes. A train from Paris to Brussels is useful, but a network that connects Paris to Brussels, to Amsterdam, to Cologne, to Frankfurt, to Munich, to Zurich, to Milan, to Barcelona, to Madrid, that's transformative. This network allows for multi-city trips entirely by train. You can travel from London to Rome, stopping in Paris, Lyon, and Milan along the way. You can go from Amsterdam to Barcelona via Brussels and Paris. The flexibility and connectivity of the European rail network make it a viable alternative to flying for complex itineraries, not just simple point-to-point trips. Airlines have networks too, but they're hub-and-spoke systems that often require backtracking. Flying from Lyon to Milan might require connecting through Paris or Frankfurt, adding hours to your journey. The train goes direct. This directness, combined with the frequency of service, makes trains more convenient for many journeys. Then there's reliability. European trains are remarkably punctual. The Swiss railway system has an on-time performance of over 90%. The French TGV is consistently above 85%. German ICE trains are above 80%. These aren't perfect numbers, but they're far better than airline on-time performance, which hovers around 70% to 75% in Europe and is often worse in the United States. This reliability matters for business travelers and anyone with tight schedules. You can plan around a train that arrives on time 90% of the time. You can't plan around a flight that's delayed 30% of the time. The predictability of trains makes them more valuable than their raw speed might suggest. But perhaps the most important factor is political will. European governments decided that railways were strategic infrastructure worth investing in. They made this decision decades ago, and they've stuck with it through multiple political cycles and economic challenges. This wasn't just about transportation. It was about economic development, environmental policy, and European integration. Railways connect countries. They make borders less relevant. They facilitate trade and tourism. They're physical manifestations of the European project of bringing nations together. The European Union has made railway development a priority, investing billions through programs like the Trans-European Transport Network. The goal is to create a seamless rail network across the entire continent, where you can travel from Lisbon to Warsaw or from Stockholm to Athens entirely by train. This political commitment means that even when individual projects face challenges or cost overruns, they generally move forward. The Gotthard-based tunnel in Switzerland took 17 years to build and cost $12 billion, but it was completed. The Lyon-Turin-based tunnel, currently under construction, will take decades and cost over $10 billion, but it's being built. These are generational investments that require sustained political will. Compare this to the United States, where high-speed rail projects are proposed, debated, scaled back, and often cancelled, where political support shifts with every election, where the idea of investing billions in railways is seen as wasteful or unrealistic. The difference in political commitment explains much of the difference in outcomes. But here's what's really interesting. The success of European railways is creating a virtuous cycle that's accelerating. As trains capture more market share from airlines, they generate more revenue. That revenue funds expansion and improvement. Better service attracts more passengers. More passengers generate more revenue. The cycle continues. Meanwhile, airlines are struggling with the opposite cycle. As they lose passengers on short-haul routes, those routes become less profitable. Less profitable routes get cut or reduced. Reduced service makes trains even more attractive. More passengers switch to trains. The cycle continues in the other direction. We're seeing this play out in real time. Airlines are cutting short-haul routes across Europe. Air France has reduced domestic flights. Lufthansa has cut routes where trains are competitive. KLM is actively encouraging passengers to take trains instead of planes for short journeys. The airlines themselves are acknowledging that trains have won the battle for short and medium-distance travel. This shift is accelerating due to environmental pressure. Flight shaming, or flygskam, as it's called in Swedish, is a real phenomenon in Northern Europe. People are choosing trains over planes for environmental reasons, even when flying might be slightly faster or cheaper. This cultural shift, combined with policy changes and economic factors, is creating a perfect storm for railways and a perfect storm against short-haul flying. So what does this mean for the future? It means more trains, more investment, more routes, more passengers. The European Commission has set a goal of doubling high-speed rail traffic by 2030 and tripling it by 2050. New lines are being built, existing lines are being upgraded, and the network continues to expand. It also means fewer short-haul flights. As trains become faster and more convenient, and as environmental regulations tighten, short-haul flying will become increasingly rare in Europe. The future of European aviation is long-haul international flights. The future of European domestic and intra-European travel is trains. This isn't speculation. This is already happening. The trends are clear. The investments are being made. The infrastructure is being built. And the passengers are voting with their wallets, choosing trains over planes in ever-increasing numbers. So why does Europe still choose trains over planes? Because trains are better, they're faster for short and medium distances when you measure the full journey. They're more convenient, departing from city centers with high frequency. They're more reliable, with better on-time performance. They're more comfortable, with space to work and move around. They're better for the environment, producing a fraction of the emissions. And they're supported by decades of infrastructure investment and political commitment. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't stubbornness. This is rational choice based on what actually works. Europe chose trains because trains deliver what people need: speed, convenience, reliability, comfort, and they deliver it in a way that's sustainable and scalable. The lesson for the rest of the world is clear. If you want effective transportation, invest in railways, not as a supplement to flying, not as a tourist attraction, but as the primary mode of medium-distance travel. Build the infrastructure, create the networks, provide the service, and people will use it. Europe proved this works. The question is whether other regions will learn from their example. So here's my question for you. If you're European, how often do you choose trains over planes? And if you're American, does seeing how well trains work in Europe make you wish we had the same? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into why Europe chooses trains over planes, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got more transportation infrastructure and policy analysis coming your way. Until next time, remember that the best transportation isn't always the fastest. It's the one that actually works for people. Safe travels.